I'm Mike Brilla, host of the Inspired Teacher Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Barbara Blackburn. That's right, she's back, and she's the creator of awesome, practical, user-friendly books. Today we're talking about her latest, Scaffolding for Success, helping learners meet rigorous expectations across the curriculum. Oh, this is powerful. It provides you with an amazing amount of tools to use to help you get the students to understanding the content. So cool. So amazing. Thanks for listening. Oh, by the way, it'd be so cool if you took a minute to help out the podcast. How can you do that? Glad you asked that question. Well, here are 3 ways. 1 is you could tell a friend and share links. 2, you could go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And 3, click on a link on my website homepage where it says Buy Me a Coffee. And by doing this, you could donate $1 or $2 or $5 or more to help me address the costs, associated with producing the podcast. That'd be so cool. You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
So some scaffolding work for all students, some work for some students, some work for an individual student. And so that's sort of the art of it. It's easy sometimes just to go, oh, this will work for scaffolding. I'll just do it with everybody. Well, maybe everybody doesn't need it. So you've really got to stop and plan.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Milletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Milletto.
Ranked in the top 10 global gurus in education, Barbara Blackburn has dedicated her life to raising the level of rigor and motivation for professional educators and students alike. What differentiates Barbara's over 30 books are her easily executable concrete examples based on decades of experience as a teacher, professor, and consultant. Barbara's dedication to education was inspired in her early years by her parents, Bob and Rose. Her father's doctorate and lifetime career as a professor taught her the importance of professional training. Her mother's career as school secretary shaped Barbara's appreciation of the effort all staff play in the education of every child. Barbara has taught early childhood, elementary, middle, and high school students and has served as an educational consultant for 3 publishing companies. She holds a master's degree in school administration and was certified as both a teacher and a school principal in North Carolina. She received her PhD in curriculum and teaching from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. In 2006, she received the award for Outstanding Junior Professor at Winthrop University. She left her position at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte to write and speak full-time. In addition to speaking at state, national, and international conferences, she also regularly presents virtual and on-site workshops for teachers and administrators in elementary, middle, and high schools. Her workshops are lively and engaging and filled with practical information. Here are a few of her most popular topics. Rigor is not a 4-letter word, which is my all-time favorite title. And soon, rumor has it, we'll have its 4th edition out.
Yes, that is true. That is true. Probably February.
So cool. Rigorous schools and classrooms leading the way. Rigorous assessments. Rigor and differentiation in the classroom. Rigor for students with special needs. Motivation plus engagement plus rigor equals student success. Research-based engaging instruction leads to higher achievement, and high expectations and increased support lead to success. Our focus today is her most recent book, Scaffolding for Success, helping learners meet rigorous expectations across the curriculum. Barbara, thanks so much for being on the show again. Welcome back, and say hi to everyone.
Hi, I love doing shows with you. You know that. We always have such a good time. And it seems like we're getting a little more frequent, but it's only because I've got several books out right now. I've got this one that has just come out, the 4th edition of Rigor's Not a 4-Letter Word. I just proofed and sent back to the publisher, and they've got me working on a 2nd edition of my assessment book. So I'm just rocking along on writing right now.
Very cool. And it's great to have you back, and it's cool that I get a chance to share your good words out there with everybody, which is awesome. So I appreciate that. All right, so Barbara, your latest book, Scaffolding for Success, helping learners meet rigorous expectations across the curriculum, that's what we're talking about. But before we talk about your book, I have to note that I have worked with you for a while now, and one of your key characteristics of training, teaching, and writing is that you're so focused on practical, user-friendly information. Can you talk about where this focus came from?
Yes, because you and I have done a variety of things now. We've worked with some training together. We've just done a variety of things. And it actually came from my first year as a teacher. I had to sit through some training that was probably about as bad as you can imagine.
Nice.
And I hated it. I thought it was awful. And I thought, well, I'm just a first year, this is going to get better. And there were some that I attended that were good, but there were a lot I attended that were bad. And I said then, teachers should never have to waste their time on something. They should invest time on things that give them something they can immediately use, whether that's reading a book or going to a workshop. And so everything I do, it's like I have a pair of glasses on that says, how can a teacher use this immediately? And that's what I write through. I teach through that lens. I do my Zoom sessions through that lens, because otherwise I feel like you've given me the gift of your time, whether you're a teacher or a leader, and I've wasted it. So that's why I am so passionate about practical ideas.
I love that. And it comes through loud and clear, because that sure did make an impression on you. That is everything. I mean, you need to have a bumper sticker or a T-shirt that says, "This is what I'm all about." So, because that's good stuff. All right. So, scaffolding for success, helping learners meet rigorous expectations across the curriculum, is another example of you being practical and user-friendly. You have tools and reproducibles that are available for your readers of Scaffolding for Success. Could you talk about the resources that you've provided and just kind of talk about why you included them?
Well, I always have things in all of my books. I always have things that work better if you have like a handout. It's not really a worksheet because it's not a traditional worksheet, but it's some kind of visual, whether it's a graphic organizer or a guide, those kinds of things. And I always put examples in the books, because it's one thing for me to say, oh, you should have a guide-orama, but I need to show you what that looks like so that you really can use it. And so my editor and I always sit down after I finish the book, and we pick 8 to 10 of them, and we put those out on the web for free. And so like one of my favorites that's on there with this book is Flesh It Out, which is a skeleton. And the idea originally was from Janet Allen, and it was a reading comprehension to do character analysis, where you have a skeleton and you want to sketch out the rest of it. So like the head is something the character thinks, the heart is something the character feels. It's like that. Well, over time, as I've worked with teachers, we've really expanded that to work in all subject areas. So for example, in this book, there is one that works with ELA, but it's more evidence-based, so that if you're writing something, an analysis maybe. But we also have a science one, a social studies one, and even a math one, where students can analyze how they solve a problem using the skeleton. So those are the kinds of things we put on there. And again, we're going to give folks my website at the end. All of them for all of my books are on my website, and you can just take them and use them. And if you're not sure about something, just email me through the website, and I'll give you some instructions to go with it. But I love being able to pick out. The hardest part is I've got to go through and just pick out 8 to 10. And I probably want to put all of them out. and my publisher is wonderful, but she's not going to let me do that. So we really do just pick out the ones we think would be most helpful for people that they can use, even if they don't buy the book.
Very nice. Very nice. Good stuff. So, and we'll come back later, like you said, and we'll do where they can find all your information and stuff in the show notes. So the title of your book is Scaffolding for Success. What do you mean by scaffolding, and how can it impact student success?
Well, scaffolding is everything we do to help students learn. So if you think about climbing a mountain, a good mountain climber, they put stakes in the mountain and they use them to help them climb. Those are scaffolding strategies. That's everything we do to help a student get higher in what they're learning. And so it might be a graphic organizer. It might be some guiding questions. It might be walking students through something orally. But scaffolding is all of the different ways we help students learn. Some strategies are good for all students. If I'm teaching a new, very complex topic, I may want to model a think aloud with everybody. But I also may have something where I've got a group of 6 who are really struggling. And so I need to give them a graphic organizer to use to help them organize their thinking. So some scaffolding work for all students, some work for some students, some work for an individual student. And so that's sort of the art of it, because it's easy sometimes just to go, oh, this will work for scaffolding, I'll just do it with everybody. Well, maybe everybody doesn't need it. So you've really got to stop and plan.
I like that. The good stuff. And we're going to get into some specifics here in just a minute as we look at a few chapters. And I pulled out a few chapters, and and I got to start with chapter 1, which is rigor and scaffolding. Could you talk about how scaffolding is it's a critical component of rigor?
Yeah. Well, and you've got to go back to my definition of rigor, because I first published it in 2005 or 8. I cannot remember. I think 2008. Because too many people believe that rigor is just doubling the amount of homework, making it harder, that kind of stuff. And that's not what rigor is at all. Rigor is creating a classroom environment in which each student is held to high expectations. They are scaffolded so they can demonstrate those high expectations, and then they actually do demonstrate that. So one of the things that I am passionate about is the higher the level of rigor in a classroom, the higher the need for scaffolding. And I just did that and realized nobody can see me. But anyway, I held one hand up and went higher, and then I held the other hand up and went higher. So that's what you have to do with scaffolding. I don't believe you can do rigor without scaffolding. I absolutely just don't believe that. The idea that, oh, they're honor students, they ought to just be able to do it on their own. No, chances are you're going to give them something to do that they need you to model it. They need you to help them structure it. They need you to help them chunk it. And just because somebody's an honor student, just because somebody is whatever, doesn't mean they don't need scaffolding.
So important to remember. I like that. Chapter 2 is called Planning for Scaffolding Instruction, and it starts off with you saying this: effective scaffolding simply doesn't happen without planning for it. Could you explain what you mean?
Yeah, it's a little bit of what I was saying just a minute ago when I said you really have to plan for it. I have taught for a very long time. I've taught a little bit of everything. And many people would tell you I'm a very good teacher, that I'm very good at my workshops, those kinds of things. I am, because I plan what I'm going to do. Now, I don't necessarily script out every word I'm going to say, but I have a really good plan for what I'm going to do, because I can get up in front of a group. If you walked in and said, Barbara, you need to go talk to this group right now about rigor, I can get up and do that, but I'll do a better job if I've had time to plan for it. And that's true with my writing. I get a lot of feedback. People really like my books. This one is number 35, I think. And people really like my books. But you know what? I plan. I plan it just like I'm planning a lesson. I sit down and I outline, then I do some research, and I try to put the research in with the chapters, and I do some more research. I figure out where I'm going to put in all of my practical ideas. I do so much planning. I mean, my husband just goes, how do you do all of that? But if I didn't do that, I wouldn't end up with a book this good. And I think that's the part that, again, I learned as a teacher is I may be good just on my feet, but I'm better if I plan. And if you really want to be as effective as possible, and if you want to truly meet the needs of kids these days whose needs are all over the place, if you really want to be the best you can be for them, you've got a plan.
Excellent. Love it. And, I think too often sometimes because we lucked out in one classroom or something like this, or one day because we just flew by the seat of our pants, that suddenly that becomes easier to do. And I think that becomes a bad road to go down, because eventually it's going to come back and haunt you with what you're doing with your kids.
Again, you can be a good teacher and not necessarily plan all the time, but you'll be a better teacher if you do. And so I don't know about your listeners, but the reason I got into teaching was to be the best teacher I could be for my kids. So I need to do the planning to make that happen.
That's awesome. I love that. All right. Could you take a minute to explain what classroom discourse is and what role it plays with scaffolding? Because you get into this whole thing, and I like this.
Well, I want you to think about students talking in the classroom. This has always gone on. Sometimes they talk to one another. Sometimes they talk in a small group. Sometimes we talk in a large group, but there's always been classroom talk. But recently we've really begun to distinguish between talk and discourse. And I can't remember who I read this with, but they said discourse is when it's about academics, and talk is when they're just having a good time. Okay.
Nice.
And there is a little bit of that. If you've ever had a group working together on a project and they were talking about last night's football game, or they were talking about the new puppy they got, that's classroom talk. Classroom discourse is working on the project, is working on the word problem. It's talking about the latest vocabulary word. It's trying to solve problems. So discourse is the conversations, whether they're individual, peer, small group, whole group. It's the conversations that are academic conversations, and they tend to use academic vocabulary. That's one of the distinguishing characteristics.
I like that. It is funny. Definitely difference between discourse and just talking about when time the bus is getting there or something. Can the hand move up? Can we move the hand up on the clock a little bit or something? Yes, most definitely different. Good stuff. All right. So one of my favorite chapters is chapter 4, and it's called Scaffolding Vocabulary Throughout the Curriculum. Talk about why a teacher should take time to, focus on vocabulary instruction. What do you think?
Well, one of the things that we know, and we have known this for a long time, so this is nothing new, vocabulary is a good indicator of learning. If you have a broader vocabulary, you tend to be a better learner, because so much of learning has to do with vocabulary. I mean, if I'm in math, but I don't have a good math vocabulary, I'm going to struggle because I'm not going to know what angle means. I'm not going to know what a parallelogram is. I'm not going to know what geometry is. So I've got to have that vocabulary no matter what the subject area is. And so we do a lot of different things. I give some graphic organizers for vocabulary. I give some strategies for some things that are just fun to do with kids so they can demonstrate learning. But one of the ones that I talk about that I think is really important is how do you create an environment that supports vocabulary? And you may be not a language arts teacher going, I don't know why I need to do this. You're going to do it with your vocabulary for your subject area. It's how you teach your subject. Having a word wall with words from your subject on it is important. Sharing books that you like that have fun with words. Oh my gosh, I grew up on the Phantom Toll Booth. My dad read it to me, then he took me to the movie. The movie's okay, but not as good as the book. But it's about Milo, who doesn't want to be in school, but he doesn't want to be at home. And so he finds a toll booth one day and goes into the kingdom of wisdom, where the first place you go is expectations, because you have to go to expectations before you can get to where you're going. And then there's Dictionopolis, which is the city of words, and Digitopolis, which is the city of numbers. And the whole thing is about words and having fun with them. And I had so much fun as a teacher with that with my students. And there are so many books like that. Like if you want a picture book, Dr. Seuss books do this all the time. So I love Dr. Seuss books. But in elementary school, there's a book called Miscellaneous and the Vocabulary Disaster. One of my favorite pair for high school is a Gebra called Al, so you get algebra, and the Chemi called Al, so you get alchemy for science. And so I really like to have books around and to talk about books that I like that are about my subject that have fun with words. Because if I have fun with words, my kids are going to have fun with words. And so that's just part of how you create the environment. I do remember a teacher I had when I was in high school, and she just flat out said, it was a science teacher, so I apologize, but I wasn't the one who said this. But she said, words are not important in my classroom.
Oh, no.
And I always thought that. I always thought, why would words not be important with science? And it was one of my least favorite classes because they said words weren't important. And so words are important no matter what you teach. So figure out how to have fun with them.
That's awesome. And that's terrible that she said words have no.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, man. It's like, really? I mean, that science classes are usually the classes that are most difficult with the vocabulary because you don't just come in contact with them any of the day, sit around the table and say, oh, let's talk about that, whatever, paramecium and anyway, just.
Yeah, I will say she did not mind giving us vocabulary tests,
Nice.
despite the fact that she said words were not important. But I never figured that out. I never figured that out. So
That's rough stuff right there. But what a great chapter. I love this chapter because it reminds you about that importance of the vocabulary. So good stuff. All right. So could you take a minute to share what teach explicitly is and why it's important? Because you do spend a little bit of time on this. I like this.
I did spend a little bit of time on that. I think sometimes that explicit instruction gets a bad rap. It either gets, okay, it's only for special needs students, or, oh, it's that thing where they're going to script it out and hand me a script and I have to follow it. And I've seen both of those happen, so I'm not going to tell you they don't. But when I really look at the heart of explicit instruction, what it's about is being very explicit in what you are teaching, not assuming that students already know something. So if you're going to start, let's go back to paramecium. You said that for science, okay? Not assuming that anybody knows what a paramecia is. Let's talk about what that is. Let's talk about what it might look like. What are the characteristics before I jump into then teaching how that information we just figured out works with the content of what we are doing. It's asking questions that very explicitly drive what you are doing. You know what your standard is, and you're very explicitly driving it. Now, a lot of people say, but that's not discovery learning, that's not exploratory learning, and we know that's important. Yes, it is. I'm not telling you that you always have to do explicit instruction. But if you're teaching something that is particularly challenging, there's a real strong place for some explicit instruction. And I will guarantee you've got some students that need explicit instruction in an area they're struggling in. And so that one, go back to planning, you really have to plan with this, because otherwise you're just going to assume somebody knows something and they don't. I remember I was watching we're going to stick with science a little bit right now. I was watching a high school science teacher teach, and he was talking about cloning. And he wanted to know if anybody knew anything about cloning. This has been about 8 years ago. He wanted to know if anybody knew anything about cloning. And this one girl raised her hand and said, I know all about cloning. That's what Martha Stewart got sent to jail for. Nice. And I didn't know what she was talking about. And then I had to go back and look it up. Well, M-clone was the stock that she got sent to jail for messing around with. And so that's what she had tied into cloning. And the teacher didn't know where to go with that, didn't know what to do with it. And stuff like that's always going to come out of the blue. But if you can intentionally plan to be very explicit and keep people on a narrow path to start with, it's easier to go on the wider path after you've already learned how to be good on the narrow path.
Makes perfect sense. And it's so important to realize and understand. And by the way, I appreciate you going forward with my paramecium, because you know why that popped in my head? It's because of a 7th or 8th grade science teacher who told all these really bad jokes. And so, I think of a paramecium, 2 lab mice.
It's always interesting what we remember. I always remember from biology, I remember planaria. Do you remember those? They're like
yes, I
black.
do.
They look like a little worm, except they also look like a little cat with ears.
Yes,
and I always remember planaria. I don't know that teacher would have wanted me to remember that out of everything, but I remember that.
That's awesome. All right. All right. So in every chapter, you give examples of what tools to use to assist the student in getting to success. Do you have a few favorite scaffolding tools? Something that you just go to?
That's such a mean question, making me pick my favorites. I do love the flesh it outs. Okay, I love those a lot. So I like those. I also like guidoramas. Guidoramas are a mix between a study guide and a think aloud. So the teacher actually writes the study guide and then mixes in things in between that are things she or he would say if they were right there with the student. And those are really good. Those have to be planned out in advance. So I don't recommend you use them all the time, but they're really good when you've got something, whether the students need to read something on their own that's challenging, or they need to watch a video and you want to make sure that they're getting the right tools out of it. So I like those. This is going to sound real simple, but it's 3 steps for reading electronic text. Because these days we have students reading text, they go to web pages, they're looking for all this stuff. And the 3 steps are focus on the main text, because there's all this stuff all around it. And, that's not what you need to do. You need to focus on the main text. And that is different from, for example, in a social studies text, you do want to focus on, oh, the map that's over there on the next page. And you do want to focus on the words that are in boldface. So online, though, you're tending to see ads and things that are about different topics. So you focus on the main text, you think before you click. So that's important because you go off on a tangent if you don't do that. And then you take notes. And so I really, really like that one too. It's simple, but it's easy to use.
Very nice. Appreciate you sharing those. And I'm sorry, I was sure you had some favorites. I mean, it's like, yeah, at least you didn't say that's like, I can't do that.
A lot of favorites. So all the favorites are in the book. I mean, you wouldn't even want to know how much research I do that gets synthesized down to what's in that book. Like I said, my husband really laughs at me because I very much work from paper. So I will end up with all of my resources that I'm going to use about a topic. So with scaffolding, I probably had 50 sources, whether they were books or videos or articles. And so I go through all of those things and highlight and tab what I'm going to use. And then I pull all of that out. And then I go back through them and code them based on what chapter in the book they're going to be in. So then I print again and put them in with the book. And then I go from there to narrow it down to write. And so I probably have, 3 reams of paper that I've printed before I ever get to the point where I write a book. So I know that cost me a tree or two. I'm sorry, people. I really am just old school. I need to work on paper when I'm writing. So
I was going to say the paper industry appreciates you. So
they like me.
Very much so.
Actually, yeah, I told you I was working on the assessment book and I ran out of paper, which is normally not a big deal because I did what most of us do. I ordered some more from Amazon. Well, for those of you who do not know, I live in Western North Carolina, and that was like 3 days before the hurricane hit. We were okay. We didn't have power for a couple of weeks, but we were okay. The flooding took place down the street, but it ended up taking me 2.5 weeks to get any paper.
Wow.
And I just was like, what am I going to do? I can't do it without my paper. And so other people were worrying about other things with good reason. We were out trying to help all of that. But I was trying to write a little bit, and I was having trouble with it because of my paper situation.
Wow. That's, I'm glad that solved itself too. So that's cool though, that that's how you do all that. Because you do a lot of writing. I mean, you're at 35, did you say?
This is 35, yep. And I've got one that is in the production process and one that I'm working on that is due at Christmas. So
wow,
keep me busy.
Wow.
I have an editor who loves me, and so we work together very well. And we actually already have sort of a plan for spring. So we haven't talked about it yet, but we know what we're going to do. So
very cool. So keep on at it. It's awesome. It's great stuff. And it's what every administrator and teacher need, just incredible, helpful thoughts and advice for what we do in the schools, working with kids. I appreciate it. All right, so I got to shift to Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is another one of my favorites, and it's called Common Concerns About Scaffolding. This chapter starts off with a segment titled, How Do I Motivate Students Who Aren't Motivated? In this segment, you share the importance of value. Let's talk about this.
Well, in my motivation book, I share that every student is motivated. They're just not motivated by what we want them to be motivated by. And that's a difference.
Nice.
But what we can do is try to tap into their motivation. And I don't talk as much about extrinsic points, tokens, all that kind of stuff, because everybody's good at that. I talk about intrinsic, that students are more motivated when they feel successful and when they see value. And so the value part is, do they see the relevance? And that can be, they understand how it will work in the job they're going to go to, or they're in the military. But it also can be for a first grader, you use the name of my cat in a math word problem. So relevance can look a lot of different ways. But there are some things we teach that it's very difficult to find the relevance. You're teaching it because you have to. You can't come up with anything. Google can't come up with anything. So there's other ways for students to see value. One way they see value is with their autonomy, which is sort of the ownership and choice. Do they get to feel like they're involved in what's going on? Another one is the activity. Students are more motivated when they're doing something than sit and get. And then they're motivated by their relationship with us. If they like us, they're more motivated in our classroom. If they don't like us, they're not. And sometimes you do everything you can do and a student still doesn't like you, or at least they act like they don't like you. I know that my stepson, when he started middle school, he would always say he didn't like his teachers. And one day he told his dad, he said, I really like them, but it wouldn't be cool of me to show that. So
Nice,
I was like, yeah, that sounds about like a 12-year-old. Sounds about right. So, you still got to work on those relationships, everything from knowing their name to smiling, even if you don't feel like it, to showing up at their extracurricular activities. And you don't have to stay the whole thing, but stay up long enough for them to see you, so all of those kinds of things matter. And those kinds of things can help students feel more motivated.
Nice. Appreciate you. It's just such a powerful segment because you hear this a lot. Yeah. The idea of, how in the world am I going to do this? Because they're not wanting to. I got to figure out how to get them to want to. And
yeah. And I would say this, if that's your number one issue right now, do not go out and get my scaffolding book. Go out and get Motivating Struggling Students. Okay. Because if you're really struggling with motivation, that's the book you want, because it's a whole book on nothing but motivation.
Like it. All right, Barbara, we're about to finish up. If someone wanted to follow up and connect with you and or learn more, where'd you send them?
Go to my website, barbarablackburnonline.com, or you can Google Barbara Blackburn and rigor, and it will take you there, which if I had known that as a 10-year-old, I think I would have been impressed. But, so just get to my website. There are so many things on the website. For example, there's over 100 free resources, and you just go to free and start wandering around. There's all these things. There's articles, there's templates. There's so much stuff. If you're a leader, you want to go there, but there's also just for leaders, and there's a bunch of articles there, how to begin and end the school year. Just all kinds of cool things. So you go there. There's also contact me. It will let you send me an email if you want to do that. It also has a phone number there. Everybody's always surprised that my phone number is up. Well, it's not my real cell phone number. It's a Google number, but it will put you through to my cell number. And I actually answer my phone. So you can get to me through that. We don't have the brand new templates up for scaffolding yet, but we'll get those up as soon as possible. Again, the hurricane did sort of throw me off track for a little bit. We're still sort of getting our feet back on the ground. You don't think about the fact that when there's mud all over the roads, the grocery stores can't get trucks in. So we're just still making everything work. And please keep all of Western North Carolina and any of the other hurricane areas in your thoughts and prayers, because there are so many needs. But that's how you can get in touch with me, barbarablackburnonline.com. Anytime you need something, let me know.
Awesome. And I'll have that information in the show notes, so it's easily found and it makes it easy just to get to you. So good stuff.
I forgot something. I forgot something. Yes, if you will let me borrow a minute of time. I am a top 10 global guru in education, and I'm going to get Steve to put up the link. 20% of the how they choose whoever they are, 20% of it is voting. So Steve will put up a link so that you can vote for me if you don't mind. I would really appreciate that.
Not a problem.
So I forgot to tell you that, Steve.
Not a problem. I'll be happy to put that up. So good stuff. And look forward to getting that, so we can post that in there so they can vote for you, because that's you definitely belong in that group. Awesome. So
thank you.
All right. So last question for you. And this is a scenario. What advice would you give a school principal that wants to use your book, Scaffolding for Success, Helping Learners Meet Rigorous Expectations Across the Curriculum, to help his team help students be more successful? What would be a good way to introduce your book and the topic?
Well, I always post, and again, I don't have this book up. Well, I may by the time you have it up, but I always do a book study guide. So you can go to any of my other books, and there are book study guides up. And I give you general ideas like how to run a group. What do you do if one person dominates it? How do you choose how to do it? Because you can have people, different grade levels, read different chapters and present to the group. I don't care how you do it, except this. Whatever you do, they need to go back and implement something. If you're going to read and talk about the chapter on classroom discourse, they have to go back and try something. Because if you don't go back and try it, nothing matters.
Awesome and so important. Thank you so much for sharing. Barbara, thank you so much for talking with me and sharing your book, Scaffolding for Success, Helping Learners Meet Rigorous Expectations Across the Curriculum. What a powerful book, incredibly practical, extremely helpful. Read it today and put it to use in the classroom tomorrow, which is what I love. Wishing you the best in all you do. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.